How do you think about ESG? I mean, I like the idea of making money and saving the environment, but at the same time, I feel there's so much greenwashing that I prefer to avoid it altogether. Although I'm known to be quite eco-conscious in many other ways. It's easy to be cynical.
ESG is a great marketing tool.
Like this guy from a clip of Industry Season 3.
Shouldn't we be wary of increasingly gearing our balance sheet toward a fad?
So I really needed help to think about ESG beyond the whole greenwashing thing, and I asked one of the leading specialists to help me, Alex Edmans.
So I'm somebody who believes in ESG. I'm a strong sustainability advocate.
She's a professor of finance at the London Business School, a leading specialist in sustainability, a prolific author.
My first book, Grow the Pie, was on the power of sustainability.
And I started by asking him his view on this particular clip. And his answer was not what I expected.
Yeah, so I think the first reaction that somebody might have to this clip is they might be triggered by it. They might say, this is an anti-woke, racist, sexist person who is just, for political reasons, trying to trash ESG because they only care about white men and they don't care about the environment or wider society. And I think the first reaction to anything which we don't like is to ask, well, could this actually be true? And is there any truth behind it, rather than dismissing it as being politically motivated? And there could be some truth, because what the person is saying, it may be in a blunt way, but that shouldn't detract from the content, is sometimes what people look like at the company are just ESG factors over and above regular factors. So they make quip about the identity of the CEO, but that is not a million miles away from what some people do in reality as investors. Is if there was a new person appointed to the board, they might say, well, are they an ethnic minority or are they a woman? As an ethnic minority myself, I care about diversity, but what matters is their credentials. Yet, when we want to try to assess the quality of a board, we only look at board diversity, or we primarily look at board diversity. There's so many other aspects of a person than their diversity. And in fact, this is actually bad for minorities, because then people think, okay, you're a good director because of your minority characteristic, and this actually underplays the actual experience and challenge that you might be bringing to the board. The views expressed in this are similar to a recent paper I wrote called The End of ESG. So you might think, well, why did I write The End of ESG? Because I'm an ESG advocate. But I'm saying the end of ESG as something which is viewed special, that it's put on a pedestal compared to other drivers of company value. So I think ESG is very important, but many other things are important, such as strategy, operational performance, capital allocation, and so on. So why is it that we are just looking at the ESG characteristics of an investment and not all of these other characteristics, which could be just as or even more important than ESG?
Understood. But when we talk about ESG, we talk about a set of metrics, right? There's also potentially the difference between those metrics and the actual impact you may have on the world.
Well, you say we talk about certain metrics, so some people talk about certain metrics, but others don't. So there's many good investors who practice ESG who don't look at metrics. So they say, well, my clients don't hire me to choose according to metrics. Anybody can do that. Anybody can just look at certain ESG metrics and know, are they high or low? But my skill as an investor is look at what's behind the metrics. Or if I look at the metrics themselves, I don't interpret this as more is always better. Should we always have the lowest possible CEO to worker pay ratio? No, not necessarily. Sometimes actually the CEO does deserve to be well paid. Sometimes a low ratio could be that you're overpaying your workers. So I think what's really important is to understand what is qualitative and not in the metrics. And even the things which are within the metrics, how to interpret them, and it's not always that more is always better, or some cases less is always better.
We're talking about the end of the ESG, and you said we should look at it in terms of qualitative aspects as well. So how does this work with qualitative aspect?
One concern with this qualitative approach is you might think, well, this is subjective. But I think anything important about investing is subjective. For example, let's assess the quality of a CEO. That's not an ESG factor. Everybody believes that the quality of the CEO does matter. And this is where the skill of an investor comes in, is to take something which is subjective, which other people can get it wrong, and therefore we might have a better view. So if ESG was just objective, then it'd be really hard to get a competitive edge, because if there was one set of ESG metrics that everybody agreed was correct, then everybody would be putting their money onto it, and you wouldn't even need people. You could just have a computer algorithm doing it. So what I really think is the really potential of ESG is it's messy. You need to get your hands dirty. These are difficult things to understand, and this is where human experience and business judgment really comes to play. And so this is why I do believe that ESG can still be outperforming, even in a world in which we have big data and artificial intelligence.
Just like Alex's book has changed the way I think of investing, of bullshit, and everything else, his perspective has given me a new outlook on this ESG and greenwashing debate. And it really reconciled with the idea of investing being linked to sustainability and, long-term social benefits. Those elements that we all put into metrics of environmental, social, governance are super important drivers of long-term growth, because we can grow the pie, just like he explained it in the paper, the End of ESG. Those are elements that come along with the traditional financial elements that we look in terms of valuing a company, but they're not above them. They're the same type of layer. And the way you invest has an impact. Environmental, social, and governance are important. But what we put as ESG metrics in the short term are totally meaningless, and we need to get rid of them. That's what I think. I'd love to hear what you think. Please let me know in the comments.